Everyone. Welcome to Holiday Survival with Ayurveda. My name is Briya Freeman.
And I'm Sebastian Peralta.
I teach courses in Ayurveda and modern spirituality here in Ottawa.
I give treatments, I sell products, and do consultations, all with Ayurveda, of course.
So we wanted to do this webinar because so many of you have questions about how do I survive the holidays and how can I use Ayurveda to help me through the holidays.
So we're here to help show you what Ayurveda can do for you in the holidays, but of course you can also incorporate this into your regular life.
Yeah, most of these principles are really good principles for day-to-day maintenance of the body-mind, but we also wanted to talk to them specifically during the holidays because the holiday time can be a time with a lot of stress and a time where we tend to eat foods that maybe we don't digest very well, or we have a lot of socializing. And also where we have those like real emotional highs around getting people together and getting family together, but where people also tend to have unfortunately, we tend to have a lot of low moments. So like high emotions or sensitive emotions or fatigue or indigestion, all of those elements tend to kind of come up more during the holidays.
Yeah, and since the holiday season lasts so long for this holidays, it can happen in the middle of the season, right? Right when your family's in town and you start crashing, which is not very pleasant for anyone.
Yeah, so we wanted you guys to have the best possible holiday. So we wanted to give you a little window into 10 tips that we have for your best holiday with Ayurveda. Yeah. And in general, in the holidays, if you're in Canada, you're talking specifically about managing usually Vata Dosha, which is the air and ether elements, as well as Kapha Dosha tends to start happening in the later winter in Canada. So Vata Dosha is really, because it's the air and ether elements, we're seeing an increase in the body-mind related to dryness, like dry skin, or dryness in the hair, or dryness sometimes in the digestive system, coldness, so cold, like lack of circulation, or cold hands and feet. A lot of excitement and enthusiasm and talking around Vata Dosha, but sometimes also we can see an increase in Vata Dosha related to the amount of stimulation we have over the holidays. So more talking, erratic schedules, staying up late, sleeping in, all of these things that tend to cause Vata Dosha to increase, and which can cause an increase in things like anxiety, insomnia, constipation, gas and bloating, all of these things that are related to the management of Vata, or the air and ether elements.
Yeah, and just something I wanted to point out is Ayurveda was created in India, and India's winter is very different than the Canadian winter. Of course, the biggest part of that is snow, but the temperature-wise, and cold is something, dry cold, like what we have here, especially in Ottawa, is something that the Vata really gets high because of. So it's very important to keep an eye on our Vata, as Briya was mentioning, during the holidays, but really the whole season, as it can keep going up and up with the temperature and dryness of the outdoors.
Yeah, and we also wanted to just talk about Kapha Dosha just a little bit, which is the earth and water elements. And so these elements, we tend to see more Kapha Dosha as the late winter comes in. So and the earth and the water elements relate to maybe some weight gain, or having a slower metabolism, or feeling when you wake up in the morning you don't have, you kind of just want to stay in bed, as well as, like too many sweets, feelings of laziness, not wanting to move all day. All of that is related to when the earth element gets too high. So we want to kind of keep an eye on that as well during the holidays, because that's kind of the element that tends to increase in the body mind in the late winter.
Yeah, so that's like right at the end of winter, before spring, or a little bit of winter, a little bit of springtime. So that's the Kapha season is starting, and that's when we really see the uptick in the Kapha. So that's the cold season. Oftentimes people have a lot of mucus, as Briya mentioned, the lethargy, laziness of it, slow movement. Even if the sun is out and spring is starting, they still don't really want to move around too much. So that's the kapha coming out.
And I know those Pitta people are on this call and they're saying, well, what about me? I'm Pitta dosha. Pitta types may also be seeing in the fall an increase in Vata and an increase in Kapha in the late winter. So you'll want to keep an eye on all your doshas to keep them balanced. And most of the time in the winter time, there can be an increase in Pitta as well, which is when we see more like headaches and rashes and anger and irritability. And there are a lot of tips that Ayurveda has on to deal with Pitta dosha, but we're not going to focus on them here just because we want to focus on holiday well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
And just to say, the Pitta imbalances will often be because of internal reasons. So diet, like stress, things in your head. So it's all internal things. Externally, the cold and weather and things, that's more the Vata and Kapha. So that's why we're focusing on those.
That's a good point. So we have 10 tips for you to stay balanced in the holidays. And most of these tips are very, very easy to understand. They should be intuitive to you. And they're probably things that your grandmother told you to do. That's always what we say about Ayurveda. So let's begin. Our first tip is to stay hydrated. And again, we talked about Vata dosha, that dryness that's going on everywhere in nature right now, especially if you're in Canada. So it's very, very important to drink throughout the day. You want to stay hydrated, drinking warm drinks, or you can do room temperature as well. Warm herbal teas are great, like chai or ginger tea. And as much as possible, we want to decrease caffeine and alcohol. Again, because these things, they do create like a surge of energy, but they also do create dryness. So we want to make sure that we're really getting a lot of warm drinks.
Mm-hmm. And so just so you know, there's 3 different types of thirst. You can have the internal thirst of your gut, and that's when you are really thirsty and you can like have a whole glass of water and you still want more. So that's when your organs are thirsty generally. There's also the mouth thirst, and that's really just because we're talking all the time. And the winter, the dryness of the season, our mouth, our lips get really dry. So for that one, you really just need a sip or two. You can even just swish it around, and then you get the benefits. And the third type of thirst is external thirst, and that's your skin. And we'll talk more about that a little later on, but the best way to hydrate your skin is actually with oil, not water. But we'll talk about that one in more detail later on.
A really important point is to avoid as much as possible, especially in the winter, but generally year-round, you want to avoid ice-cold drinks. And that's typically what we would serve in restaurants, or if we're hosting a nice party, we would serve a nice drink with ice. Especially if you're having a meal, having an ice-cold drink would kill your digestive fire. So you want that digestive fire to be hot. So as much as possible, we want to have warm drinks that help, relax the body, mind, and relax the digestive system, so that when we eat, we have that warm fire that can help us digest the food.
And we also want to try not to eat and drink at the same time, because we digest the solids and liquids differently. So you can have a couple of ounces of liquids with your meal to help it go down. But more than that, you're actually slowing down your digestion process, and you're causing more work for your body, which makes you more tired. So that'll actually help your energy levels as well.
Yeah, so you want to avoid the habit of, eating a huge hamburger and then washing it down with a huge
pop.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the food itself should be a little bit moist, and we should be able to digest it on its own. You want to talk about red wine? You having any red wine these holidays?
All right, so you can have a little bit of red wine, because red wine can be good for you. It can be good for your blood circulation, for your heart. The tricky part with wine or sugar or caffeine is dosage. So it just comes down to not overdoing it. And not overdoing it, essentially, it depends on the person, but generally that means 2 or 3 glasses of wine a week. Not a night, but a week. So if you have that, then that'll help you digest things in the winter time. So you can have like a glass of wine on Christmas Day type thing. But then if you have a glass of wine on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and then Boxing Day and then there's parents over, so it just turns into having, a glass or a couple glasses every day. That's what you want to avoid. But once in a while is okay, and it actually is good for you. So the second tip that we can talk about is having freshly cooked and warm foods. And essentially, that doesn't mean that you have to avoid certain foods. It's more that you just want to have the foods that they've been cooked and warmed, so that they're not just raw salads. You want to have warm things like squash, lentils, sweet potatoes, heartier, warming things that are good in the winter seasons that really help ground you with Mother Earth. And they also give you large amounts of prana or energy. And another way that you can continue getting this prana is that you avoid eating leftovers all the time. Having leftovers the following day is okay. But if you make, a large Christmas meal and then your family's eating those leftovers for a week, by the second day, all the energy, all the good nutrients, all the prana has more or less disappeared, especially if you have to reheat it and recook it over and over and over. So you want to try to cook smaller quantities more often, essentially day to day.
Yeah, and what happens when you end up eating a lot of leftovers for several days is that your body notices that prana is missing. And this applies also to eating like canned foods or frozen foods. If you're not eating foods that's freshly cooked, it applies because there's a quality to freshly cooked foods that your body recognizes and that it's able to digest easily. And so if you're always eating leftovers, that's when you get that feeling of not feeling completely satisfied by what you eat, and where you'll tend to overeat because your body's just looking for nourishment in other sources. So actually eating freshly cooked foods, warm, freshly cooked foods, is a really good way to stay energized and to feel satisfied by a smaller portion.
And that includes also spices and herbs. Of course, the foods are very important, but the spices are also really important. And if you cook with it for a long time, then it gets rid of a lot of the benefits. You might still have the taste, so it'll still taste as good, but you won't be getting the benefits like the anti-inflammation or anything from turmeric. So you want to make sure that it also applies to spices just as much as it does for foods.
Yeah, and cooking with herbs and spices can really go a long way to make you feel inspired by your cooking. I know, like when I'm just roasting some peppers, and like when I cook with spices in my kitchen, I feel more appetized by the meals. I feel happy to eat the food, and there's this real satisfaction that comes from incorporating those different tastes into my meal.
Definitely. Yeah, and spices can add a lot to the meal, but sometimes we actually want to not use too many spices to make it easily digestible for us, and so we can quickly process the food, especially if it's like a dish like a soup or stew or something like that. Sometimes it's good to not use too many spices. Keep it simple for our bodies.
Yeah, you mean like using spices that aid digestion without creating like a soup that's made of like sriracha sauce or something, like where it's overstimulating. Yeah, there's that balance between using the spices in a way that enhances digestion without creating food that's overstimulating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
The next point is to, as much as possible, we want to reduce snacking or avoid snacking. And this is really tempting over the holidays because there's so much food that's out, but it will really go a long way to help you feel more satisfied by your meals and also to keep that energy level stable.
I have to say, this is actually a really hard one for me personally. I'm a big snacker, especially at nighttime. But I've been working on it, and the first little while was tough, but I'm noticing now I don't even want the snacks as much. So your body will actually learn what's good for it once it sees the light side, right? The right way to do it is like, oh, actually, I feel a lot worse, especially the following day. I feel a lot better if I hadn't been snacking during the night previously. So you always want to try to have, 3 to 5 hours between meals to make sure that you fully digest the previous meal before your next one. So your body is not constantly, working to catch up from the previous meal, the previous day, the previous week. It's just never ending. So especially if you're eating a lot of like breads and carbs and things, because those take longer to digest.
One of the things I love when I feel like I need a little something in the afternoon, but I don't really want a snack. I just make myself a nice chai with ginger and cinnamon and clove and a little bit of milk or almond milk and a little bit of honey, and I feel energized by it, but I don't actually need an actual snack.
Mm.
So
A lot of times, herbs and spices can be just as nourishing as actual food. Mm-hmm.
So our next point is to cook and to eat with love. And here we're going to break everything we just told you a little bit. And we're going to say that it's not necessarily always about what you eat, but the state of mind that you have while you're eating.
And when you cook it.
Yeah. So when we're cooking, when we're eating, when we're in conversation with other people, we want to be aware that if we're in a state of mind that's very agitated or very stressed out, even the best meal, we don't necessarily get those healing benefits in the meal. So as much as possible, we want to relax when we cook. We want to enjoy our cooking. We want to enjoy the smells. We want to enjoy being with each other, and the actual process of offering food to other people is really has emotional benefits for yourself and for the people that you cook for.
Mm-hmm. And this is one that is, like Briya said, it's really just from your emotional state, your emotional well-being, and it affects you more on a subconscious, deeper level. So it's not necessarily something that you'll notice like the next day. It's like, oh, I was definitely angry when I cooked this meal yesterday. It's more that you just notice that you feel a little better when you build this connection with your own body and the food that you are cooking and eating with. Like we said, it does matter, but it almost doesn't matter what food that is, as long as you're building a healthy relationship with your own digestion system and the whole process.
Yeah, and that inner intelligence, your body's inner intelligence, is more present with you when you're in that state of mind, and you're able to make the right choices. You're able to moderate any, like bad habits or any tendencies to overeat or to like emotional eating. All of that comes into balance, or comes into a greater state of harmony when you're in that state yourself, and when you're surrounded by people that you love.
Yeah. So the sixth tip that we have for you is a little more basic or simple than the other ones, I should say. It's using a herb called Triphala, and it's something that a lot of Indian kids just grow up taking. They don't know what it is or why they're taking it, but their grandmothers just, force feed them a spoonful every day. But essentially, it's a simple mixture of 3 different herbs that you can take that is a mild daily detox. So it won't necessarily make you go to the bathroom more or even stronger. It won't help specifically your bowel movements or digestion. It's more about collecting the daily toxins, and whenever you do go to the bathroom, it'll naturally flush out. So it'll be just a little smoother of a process, because that's what we want. Is we want the daily toxins that we will and always will continue to get to just be flushed out on a regular basis.
And Triphala, the name means 3 fruits. So it's a combination of 3 fruits that are made to balance the 3 doshas. So it's a very simple formula made from 3 fruits that helps balance the liver, helps strengthen the colon, helps nourish the blood. Like, it really has so many benefits. They say that if you don't have a mother, you can take Triphala and it will have the same effect in taking care of your overall health. So that's one we recommend, and we'll provide a link
And
below.
Anyone can take it. The only person that shouldn't be taking it is pregnant women. But other than that, whether you're sick or you're healthy or you're a child or an elder, anyone can and should be taking Triphala their whole lives. It's something that is good for you no matter what.
And non-habit forming.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not difficult. necessarily, although it doesn't actually taste all that good, but the tablets are easy.
It's a really good one that I recommend as well for people who are new to yoga and meditation
Mhm.
and natural healing, because it has so many benefits and so easy to take. So
Mhm.
that's a good one. It's really good for the holidays when we do maybe overeat, or we're combining foods that we don't normally eat. Triphala is a really great saving grace.
Mhm. So we talked about hydration earlier. That was the first tip. So this tip number 7, I talked about oleation, applying oil on your skin for the external hydration. And so this tip is about oleation, it's called, and that's applying oil to yourself on your skin. But that also includes internally. So that could be cooking with oil or cooking with ghee, which is clarified butter. And so all of this oleation provides essentially this protective layer around your body, internally and externally. Because a lot of times our bodies can heal itself, it just needs the space and the time and energy to do that. So the oleation provides the space, which also gives it its time, and then the energy it'll get just naturally from the foods, but also from the oleation gives it a little bit of energy as well. So the 2 things I would recommend doing winter, hands down, is oleation and the triphala. Those 2 things, hands down, the best things you can do during this season.
Yeah, so people can oleate their own bodies using warm sesame oil
Mm-hmm.
before bathing. They can also oil their feet, give themselves a little foot massage before bed. It's a really good technique to balance the body mind before sleep and to get really sound, restful sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And they can also use things like Nasya oil. We got this from our friends at Banyan Botanicals. So Nasya oil is a really great oil that you'd apply into the nasal passages to help hydrate the nose during this winter season.
Yeah, the sinuses, I'm sure we've all noticed here, are one of the first things that dry up, and it's dry cold. You know, when those days that you come out, it's so cold, and your nostrils and everything just dries up right away. So this oil, the Nasya oil, it's sesame oil based. You just do a couple of drops in your nose on a daily basis, and it really helps keep it lubricated and healthy.
The next point that we want to make is exercise and sunshine. This is so important, especially in the winter in Canada. As we know, our days are much shorter. It's dark outside very, very early.
Pretty much as soon as you get home from work.
Yeah. So as much as possible, what you want to try to do is to get 20 minutes every day of sunshine, even if it's very scantily available right now. So that's so important to keep that balanced mood during the winter months and to combat seasonal depression, which I know is an issue for a lot of people. Also just the exercise. You don't necessarily need to, you can go to the gym if you want, but just moving around. Like you could do yoga at home, you can go for a walk, you can dance, you can do so many things, but just making sure that you're getting that daily sweat at least daily or at least a few times a week, just to keep the circulation moving, because things tend to get a little bit more stagnant in the winter.
Mm-hmm. And something that you can keep in mind too is you don't necessarily need to start like dripping sweat every time. If you're doing it more often, you can do little bits, daily. Just going out for that 5-10 minute walk every day will be more helpful than going to the gym once a week for 2 hours. So keeping that in mind, that little chunks can be more useful than one big chunk.
Yeah, our culture tends to push us into extreme sports or extreme workouts, when actually what your body just needs is a few disciplined breaks throughout the day where you can actually move and create more of that lubrication circulation within your body.
Mm-hmm. So the 9th tip, we talked about the oleation, the oil on the skin. So that goes hand in hand with this. And this is just indulging in treatments, treating yourself. Because as we all know, this is a crazy time of year. It's very hectic. There's things going on all over. So we want to take time out of the day to focus on ourselves as well. And one of the best ways, although I'm biased, but one of the best ways to do this is by massages, getting massages. And so any massage with oil is especially good because, as I mentioned, the oil is helpful in a multitude of ways. But the massage itself is also helpful because it gets the oil in, but it also helps you relax. But I find it was really helpful for me to learn about my own body. like, oh, this hurts when I do this, or I feel really good here. And then you can do it yourself at home, or you can get your partner to do it. And then you can just do it at home. Then you don't even need to leave your house, right? We all want that. And so it's a great way to learn about your body and your mind so you know what's going on, because so much of this season is so hectic. The more imbalanced we are with ourselves, the more we'll be able to deal with all of this. And just a couple of treatments that I offer, just to give you an idea, the ones that I would recommend, there's one called Abhyanga, and that's the full body massage. So it's an hour long and it's the whole body. So that, of course, is a great one because it gets oil everywhere. And I call it, that's the physical massage. I have another treatment called Shirodhara, and I call that a mental massage. And it uses warm medicated oil over the forehead, and it's about 45 minutes long, and it's sort of like an induced meditation. And so you really go deep into your own mind. You can have all kinds of reactions from it. People start laughing, crying, farting, burping, all kinds of things. And it can really help just clear things up. You know, you think, I haven't thought about it in years. And then you leave it, you let it go. So that's how you work through things, right? So that's a great mental massage is how I describe it.
I love that treatment. As a long-term meditator, it really, it stimulates the pituitary gland and the pineal gland, and anything, you know, like if we do a lot of work on computers or mental work, it really helps move any of that stress or stimulation. Even if we're not a stressed out person, like there's input that we're receiving on a daily basis, like these impressions. And so the Shirodhara really helps to liberate those impressions from the mind. And as Seb says, you can have certain memories be released, or certain like deep held mental tension.
Even physical too.
Yeah. And then when I go back to work, my mind is so much clearer, so much sharper. And yeah, I just feel like I can focus for longer hours, and I'm much more positive and much more in harmony with my own self.
Mm-hmm. And then on the physical level, also your hair will just love it. It's so much oil on the scalp and stuff, like it just gets this shine on it afterwards. And we did mention the Nasya treatment on the nose. You can also do that in your ears as well, actually. And that is another great treatment for the winter time. Mm-hmm, definitely. So the 10th and final tip that we have for you is pretty important, but we oftentimes just forget it because we're so busy. But essentially, it's just take time for yourself. Put yourself first. And that can mean a number of things. It could mean meditation, which we highly recommend, but just quiet, you know, like going off and doing your own thing, doing your hobby, reading, doing your daily practice, your yoga, your breath work, going out with friends, something that you personally want to do, can be very, very helpful in dealing with the hectic lifestyle that we have this time of year.
Yeah, taking a bath, turning off your phone for 5 hours, those kinds of things. I'm a big believer personally that anything we do that is in alignment with what we truly need is actually also serving the best in other people. Mm-hmm. So when we actually listen to our own needs and follow those needs authentically, then we're actually helping other people to come to their own realization and to align with their best selves. We also teach a course called Practical Awakening in Ottawa here that's very, very powerful, that gives an introduction to Ayurveda, gives an introduction to spiritual practice, a really, really strong and energizing and replenishing spiritual practice that can really help to sustain you over the holidays and to create that balanced mind and to keep you in that naturally positive state. And I think personally, I would say that commitment to a daily practice can really make a big difference in how much you're able to apply Ayurveda, how much you awaken your body's own intelligence, and how much you're able to then translate that into making smart choices for yourself throughout the holidays and really all year.
Mm-hmm. I find the daily practice is a great way to basically just reset myself on a daily basis. So it's not like, you know, day after day after day, you're building up all this stress and things and blah and family. If you have a practice, and that practice can vary a lot depending on which helps you. But having a daily ritual practice really helps reset my mind. Like, okay, it's a new day. Whatever happened yesterday, whatever is happening tomorrow is fine. Let's focus on today. And that really helps me personally.
Good. So are we ready to take a few? We have a few questions. Those are our 10 tips. And so we have a few questions from our listeners, and we wanted we'll answer. So we have 2 questions here. The first question is, what does Ayurveda say about staying energized during the holidays? I find I tend to get very exhausted, overstimulated, and anxious from dealing with family and friends, and tend to spiral into a series of bad habits. That's a good question. So dealing with exhaustion, overstimulation, and then falling into a series of bad habits. That's a really good question. Like too much sugar, too much alcohol, too much food, oversleeping, going away from your exercise plan. Seb, do you have any comments on that?
I think we definitely all deal with that on some level for sure. This actually kind of ties into what we were just talking about with the daily practice, or just having that, taking time to yourself. That is one of the best things that you would actually be able to do to just mitigate these factors, because you're essentially a battery. So if you're working at 100%, then great, and over time you're obviously going down. But the closer you get to 0 or below 0, it's harder to restart when you're low energy. But if you reset yourself on a regular basis, every time you get to 50% or 40%, whatever, then it's much, much easier to restart, to re-energize that battery level so you are ready for the day and the season. So when you do reach that point of the season's over and you're starting those bad habits, it's much easier to break out of them. Because I'm not saying you're never going to have those bad habits. It's more just about being able to break out of them when you're done, indulging yourself. Anything to add?
Yeah, I would come back to so first of all, I would say when you're feeling really exhausted, that is also part of your body's own intelligence to tell you to slow down, to tell you to take a break from the obligations that are created by your mind, and to do things that actually nourish you, whether that means slowing down to eat and to cook wholesome meals for yourself, taking walks when you need to, taking baths, like doing things that actually replenish you and fill you up from the inside. And what tends to happen is when we're chronically exhausted, we tend to look for energy from external things, like other people, like social connections, or through like alcohol, drugs, coffee. And that really puts us into, you're kind of stealing energy from your own kidneys, from your own reserves, your natural reserves of energy. So as much as possible, we want to be aware, even if you can sometimes have caffeine, we want to be aware of when we're overdoing it, when we're overstimulating ourselves, to maintain like a chronic stress response in our lives to things that we don't actually need to be doing, or that are out of alignment with our actual body's intelligence. So a lot of the things we've talked about in this call are about coming back into alignment with your body's own intelligence, and either through sadhana, through daily practice, or through eating certain foods, or from slowing down. All these are simple tricks, like coming back to nature is really important. All these things are simple tricks to connect you with your body's own energy that you have, and that is meant to carry you through your day. And in the wintertime, it's okay to get a little bit more tired, to rest a little bit more, to go a little bit more inward. And sometimes we try to keep the same schedule as we do throughout the rest of the year, and we're not actually meant to do that. So it's great if you can take more time to rest. And I think that's part of obeying your body's inner call towards rest, without falling into the trap of just becoming like very, very lethargic. So finding that balance between action and non-action, activity and rest is part of your own harmony, your own sense of harmony and balance with your whole life.
And it can be tricky at first to, find that harmony.
Yes.
Because if you're not used to basically having a conversation with yourself and knowing like, oh, I'm tired because of this, let's rest. But if you keep pushing yourself or ignoring your own inner monologue, then it gets harder and harder to just notice what is happening in your own body and mind. But the more that you do start to notice these little things, the easier it gets and the more natural it becomes, to the point of eventually just always being connected to yourself.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because Ayurveda says that we have this natural intelligence within us at all times, but that oftentimes we don't listen to it. And so that's what we call crimes against intelligence, where we say, I need to stop working and I need to take a rest, but instead we push ourselves further. Or when we have that message that says, I need to get out of my house and I need to go socialize with other people, but we don't listen. Or I need to turn off my cell phone now, and we don't listen. So you always have the natural intelligence. And if you're very, very, very depleted, it's because it's a good time to start nourishing yourself and start tuning into that natural intelligence on a daily basis. It's really the choices we make on a daily basis that build and that accumulate into the reserves of energy that we have to live our lives.
So that's the first question. The second question we have is, I get very stressed out about dealing with my mother-in-law over the holidays. She always wants to feed us food that she thinks is traditional Christmas food, but they're often full of sugar, cheese, meat, and so on. Do you have any tips from Ayurveda on how to deal with stressful in-laws? All right.
Compassion.
Yeah, pretty much. This one just comes down to communication. The last question we were talking about self-communication, talking about yourself with yourself. This one we're talking about communication with others, which can actually be a lot more difficult, mostly because there's a lot more bias, I guess is the right word, where it's just you're coming from your perspective and they're coming from their perspective, which is obviously not the same. So there can be a lot of misinterpretation. And being able to have that conscious communication between the parties is probably the most helpful thing that in this situation that you could do to help deal with the situation.
I would say, like a lot of the tips we've talked about, like keeping a good digestive fire and taking Triphala, and like all these things actually feed your own strength. And that strength is your own ability to make decisions about what foods you eat and what foods you don't eat, and where you can make exceptions to your rules and where you don't. And what I found with working with Ayurveda is when I first started, I was really like a little bit militant about what I was eating and what I didn't eat. And that was just part of my own, like I was trying to figure out how to heal. And then as time went on, it became more about a balance of, it's like that Buddha, that story of the Buddha where, he's talking about the lute playing and how the strings have to be not too tight and not too loose. And that's part of how you apply Ayurveda, these concepts that are in some ways so intuitive and so natural. In some ways they can seem really, really foreign to the culture that we live in. So having that approach where you're not too tight and you're not too loose, you don't just forget about all of what you've learned to please other people, and you're also not rigidly defending yourself. Finding that place of inner balance would really go a long way to help harmonize you with the people around you and with your own state of natural equilibrium.
Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about how if you're coming from a place, this is what I'm doing for myself, and you're honest with yourself and with others, then they can or should respect you for that. And then it gets much easier to have the communication behind it. So you can have a healthy relationship with everyone, including yourself and in-laws and everyone.
Yeah, that same state of compassion with yourself, and then it actually radiates outward, and then nobody really notices what you're eating, or it's like that the food is like a byproduct of that natural state of compassion and harmony with other people. So it gets easier, I would say, as you start incorporating more and more of these principles into your life. And But yeah, stay away from refined sugar. It's really
Mhm.
bad.
Definitely.
I think that's our last question.
Yeah, so that's all the questions we have, and we have those tips. We hope that these tips and these questions will help you in your holiday season, and you're able to use Ayurveda purposefully and thoughtfully in your life for the coming years, really.
And how can people get hold of you, Sab, if they're interested in learning more?
So my business is called Viveda, which in Italian and Sanskrit means Ayurveda as well, so the science of life. And you can reach me at my email. We'll add the description to this and my phone number as well. And if you have any questions or want to set up a consultation or appointment, just send me an email, give me a call, and we can definitely set something up.
Yeah. And so you do pulse reading in Ottawa, you do traditional Panchakarma, which is the Ayurvedic program for detox and rejuvenation.
Yep.
And you do like a full host of Ayurvedic treatments.
Yeah, I have about half a dozen different treatments and the consultations, and I'm starting to make my own oils and spices.
Oh yeah, he has some amazing spice blends.
Yeah, so I've had those for a few years. So I have different spice blends for each of the different body types, depending on what you specifically need. So it's not just one blend for everyone. And then I'm also making my own oils now with the different body types as well. And yeah, we're expanding with these talks and seeing how we can get Ayurveda into everyone's lives.
And my name's Briya, and I have a website called BriyaFreeman.com, and I teach courses in Ottawa in meditation, in Ayurveda, and modern spirituality. I also have an upcoming course starting in January 2020 called Ayurveda for Vibrant Living. And it's a 6-month, we meet once a month. It's a practical exploration of some of these principles, and we're going to go a lot deeper. That's starting, in January 2020. So you can check that out as well on my website. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to sharing more with you in our upcoming videos.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.